On July 4, 1776, 13 British colonies declared that they were no longer part of the British Empire. But there was one enormous problem. Britain had one of the most powerful militaries on Earth. The colonies had no independent army, no navy, no established government, and no guarantee that their declaration would succeed. What followed was a war that lasted years, cost thousands of lives, and transformed the political map of the world. This is the story of how 13 colonies became the United States of America. By the 1760s, Britain controlled 13 colonies along the eastern coast of North America. The colonies had their own assemblies and local governments, but they remained under British authority. Then, Britain faced a massive financial problem. The 7 Years' War had left Britain deeply in debt. London wanted the American colonies to contribute more to the cost of maintaining the empire. So Parliament introduced new taxes and regulations. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and eventually, the Tea Act. Many colonists weren't necessarily opposed to taxation itself. Their objection was to taxation without political representation in Parliament. Their argument became simple. If we are British subjects, shouldn't we have a voice in the government that taxes us? Tensions grew. Protests spread. And in 1773, a group of colonists in Boston threw British tea into the harbor. The event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Britain responded with even stricter measures. Instead of restoring order, they pushed the colonies closer to rebellion. In 1774, colonial representatives gathered in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They still hoped to resolve the crisis. But by the following year, compromise was rapidly disappearing. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched toward the towns of Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. Shots were fired. British soldiers encountered armed colonial militia, and the American Revolutionary War had begun. The conflict quickly spread. George Washington was appointed commander of the Continental Army, but the Americans faced enormous disadvantages. Britain had professional soldiers, a powerful navy, and enormous financial resources. The colonies had determination, but determination alone wasn't enough. They needed allies. As the fighting continued, many colonists began reaching a radical conclusion. They didn't simply want better treatment from Britain. They wanted independence. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. Written primarily by Thomas Jefferson, it announced that the 13 colonies considered themselves free and independent states. Its famous opening argument was revolutionary. All men are created equal. But declaring independence didn't make it reality. The war continued. Washington's army suffered defeats. The British captured important cities, including New York. The future of the rebellion remained uncertain. Then, the Americans achieved a crucial victory. In October 1777, American forces defeated a major British army at the Battle of Saratoga. The victory changed the war. France had been watching the conflict carefully. Now, France decided to openly support the American cause. French money, weapons, troops, and most importantly, the French Navy. The conflict was no longer simply Britain fighting 13 rebellious colonies. It had become a much larger international war. In 1781, American and French forces surrounded the British Army commanded by General Charles Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia. With the French Navy blocking escape by sea, Cornwallis surrendered. The fighting did not immediately end everywhere, but Yorktown made continued British attempts to defeat the rebellion increasingly difficult. In 1783, Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States through the Treaty of Paris. After years of war, the 13 colonies were no longer British colonies. They were a new nation, the United States of America. But independence was only the beginning. The new country still had to answer enormous questions. How should it be governed? Who should have political power? How should the states work together? And what did equality actually mean in a society where slavery still existed? Those questions would shape American history for generations. The American Revolution began with a dispute over taxation and political representation. It ended with the creation of a new country and a political idea that would echo far beyond North America. A government could be challenged, an empire could be resisted, and a people could declare that political authority ultimately depended on the governed. But the revolution's promise was never completely fulfilled in 1776. It became an unfinished experiment, one that Americans would continue arguing over, fighting over, and redefining. The United States had won its independence. Now, it had to figure out what independence actually meant.